Officer Daniels had always believed that life on the streets followed a predictable rhythm. Patrol, paperwork, lunch, patrol, paperwork again. That rhythm was comfortable, almost comforting, in its repetition. Yet, it was during one of those routine lunch breaks that his world subtly shifted. The small diner near the park was tucked between a laundromat and a run-down bookstore, its neon sign flickering faintly like it hadn't seen a painter in decades. To Daniels, it was a quiet refuge from the relentless energy of the city, a place where the clatter of dishes and the low hum of conversation were almost therapeutic. It was there that he first noticed Mariah. She was sitting alone at a corner table, her coat threadbare, her backpack slung loosely over a chair, and her hands wrapped around a chipped ceramic mug. There was something in her posture that caught his attention, not shame, not defeat, but a kind of calm resilience that refused to be ignored. He hesitated at the doorway, as if stepping fully into the diner might break some fragile spell, then made his way to the counter to order. As he waited, he couldn't help but glance toward her. She looked up, meeting his gaze with a faint, knowing smile. It wasn't one of pity or desperation, it was quiet, self-possessed, almost challenging. Daniels felt a strange pull, something between curiosity and empathy, and when he noticed an empty chair at her table, he found himself walking over and asking, "Mind if I sit?" Her eyes flickered, appraising him quickly. Then, without a word, she nodded. The gesture was simple, yet it carried weight, an unspoken permission, an invitation into her space, her moment. Daniels sat down, ordering his sandwich quietly, aware of how out of place his uniform might look against her casual, worn clothing. For a moment, the diner's usual noise receded, leaving only the gentle scrape of utensils and the soft murmur of other patrons. They began with small talk, hesitant and measured. Daniels asked her name, learning that she was Mariah, and she returned the question with a quick, curious tilt of her head. She spoke with ease, her voice steady, tinged with warmth, revealing layers of intelligence and wit that no one would guess from her appearance alone. He found himself drawn into her stories, not the sensationalized versions of hardship that the media often recycled, but personal anecdotes full of subtle humor, quiet sorrow, and unfiltered honesty. She spoke about her days wandering the city, the odd jobs she took to scrape by, and the books she read whenever she could get her hands on one. Daniels shared his own stories too, though they were far less harrowing, filled with routine police work, occasional frustrations with bureaucracy, and the small triumphs of keeping the streets safe. In her presence, he found a rare freedom to speak openly, without judgment, without the usual barriers erected by rank and protocol. Time moved differently at that table. An hour could feel like 5 minutes, and a glance could feel like a conversation in itself. Over sandwiches and coffee, they discovered a surprising number of commonalities. Both had grown up in the city, both had experienced loss, both carried a quiet resilience that the world often overlooked. She laughed easily at his attempts at humor, teasing him gently about the stiffness of his uniform and the predictability of his life. He, in turn, found himself fascinated by the way she observed the city, how she noticed details others ignored, like the way sunlight filtered through the leaves in the park or the subtle changes in street sounds over the course of the day. Week after week, their lunches became a ritual. Daniels began to look forward to the conversations, the shared silence, and the occasional bursts of laughter. Each meeting felt like a small reprieve from the chaos of the city and the relentless demands of his job. He realized that, without even realizing it, he had started to rely on these moments, and more than that, he had begun to care for Mariah in ways that surprised him. He also noticed the small signs of her life outside the diner, the careful way she organized her belongings, the books she carried, the sketchpad she sometimes pulled out to draw the city from memory. She had a dignity that defied her circumstances, a strength that spoke quietly but powerfully. Daniels respected her for it, and at the same time, he felt a growing desire to protect her from the harsher realities of the streets, a desire he hadn't expected to feel so strongly. By the time their meal ended and he returned to his patrol, Daniels carried with him a strange mix of contentment and unease. Lunch with Mariah had become more than just a break, it was a window into another world, a reminder of the complexity and humanity that existed beyond reports and arrests. And though he didn't yet know it, that quiet routine, those unremarkable Tuesdays, would soon be the very thing that would test him in ways he could never have anticipated. Their connection was subtle, almost imperceptible to anyone else who might have glanced their way, but to Daniels, it was unmistakable. And as he walked back toward the streets, he couldn't shake the feeling that meeting Mariah was the beginning of something far larger than either of them could see, a story unfolding in the quiet corners of a city too busy to notice its own heart. The weeks following their first lunch passed with a strange, comforting rhythm. Officer Daniels found himself counting the days until he could meet Mariah again. Their conversations had become a sanctuary, a space where the outside world, its sirens, its demands, its endless reports, seemed to fade away. Each Tuesday, he would arrive early, sometimes to find her already at the corner table, a warm mug in her hands, eyes scanning the room as if she could see far beyond its walls. She had an uncanny way of noticing details most people overlooked. The way the light shifted across the cracked tiles, the soft hum of a ceiling fan, even the subtle expressions of fellow diners. Mariah seemed to thrive in these small observations, weaving them into her stories with a wit that kept Daniels engaged. One Tuesday, she told him about a stray dog she had befriended, a scruffy little thing that had claimed a corner of the park as its territory. She described its antics in such vivid detail that Daniels could practically see it dancing through puddles, ears flopping with every jump. On another occasion, she recounted the quiet rebellion of a street musician who played the same corner every day, his fingers dancing over guitar strings despite calloused hands and blistered fingers. Daniels found himself captivated by her perspective. Through her eyes, even the ordinary felt extraordinary. Their talks slowly moved beyond anecdotes to something deeper. Mariah spoke candidly about the hardships she had endured, losing her family in a sudden tragedy, struggling with a city system that seemed indifferent to people like her, and the constant challenge of surviving without a home. She never asked for pity, only understanding, and Daniels found himself listening with a level of focus he rarely gave to anything outside of duty. He shared his own burdens too, the stress of cases that went unsolved, the frustrations with bureaucracy that slowed justice, and the moments of doubt when he questioned whether he was truly making a difference. It was during one of these quieter lunches that Daniels first noticed something unusual. A man in a dark suit entered the diner, moving with a precision that suggested training, not leisure. His gaze swept the room methodically, as though cataloging each person, each detail, before settling on their table. He slid into the booth opposite them without warning, a badge glinting faintly under the fluorescent lights. Daniels stiffened immediately, his hand resting subtly on the edge of the table, instinctively aware that this was no ordinary visitor. The man's voice was low, controlled, yet urgent. "Officer Daniels, we need to talk about her," he said, gesturing toward Mariah. Daniels felt a chill run down his spine. Mariah's calm demeanor did not waver. She simply smiled, a small, enigmatic curve of her lips that didn't betray any fear. Daniels' mind raced. Danger, threats, questions he couldn't yet articulate. "What do you mean?" he asked, keeping his tone even, professional, though his heart was pounding. The man leaned closer, lowering his voice. "She's in danger. There are people who would do her harm if they knew where she was. You need to protect her." Daniel's eyes darted to Mariah, searching for a reaction, but she only nodded subtly, as if confirming what the man had said. His stomach twisted. He had known she lived on the streets, but this suggestion of targeted danger was something entirely new. It turned every moment they had shared into a potential risk he hadn't anticipated. Mariah reached into her coat without hesitation, pulling out a folded document. The motion was smooth, practiced, and yet Daniels could sense the tension behind it. The papers contained information about her true identity, and suddenly the pieces began to fall into place. She wasn't just a homeless woman navigating the city, she was someone significant, someone with knowledge, evidence, and the potential to disrupt powerful forces. Daniel's mind raced to comprehend the implications. His quiet lunches, the bond they had formed, were now entangled in something much larger, far beyond his usual scope of law enforcement. The diner seemed to shrink around them, the air heavy with a weight that Daniels hadn't felt before. Mariah's calmness contrasted sharply with the gravity of the situation, and he realized that her strength was not just survival, it was courage, intelligence, and a clear understanding of the stakes. The man in the suit, sensing Daniel's shock, handed over a small card with instructions: "Keep her safe, follow protocol, and, above all, do not let anyone know she was here." Daniels felt an overwhelming mix of fear, responsibility, and a strange exhilaration. He had known danger in his career, but this was different. This was personal, intimate, and immediate. He looked at Mariah, truly looked at her, and understood the trust she had placed in him by sharing this part of her life. He realized that protecting her was no longer just about doing his job. It was about honor, loyalty, and a bond that had grown quietly over weeks of shared lunches and conversations. As the man in the suit left as abruptly as he had appeared, Daniels exhaled slowly, trying to steady himself. Mariah folded the documents carefully and tucked them back into her coat. She smiled at him, a quiet reassurance that they could handle this together. And in that moment, Daniels knew that everything had changed. Their lunches, once a refuge from the world, had become the first line of defense in a dangerous, unfolding story, one that neither of them could have predicted, yet both were now inextricably part of. The ordinary Tuesday, the laughter over sandwiches, the shared stories of the city, everything had been a prelude to this moment. Daniels felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders, and he also felt a strange sense of purpose. Mariah was no longer just someone to share a meal with. She was someone he would protect at all costs, someone whose story had become intertwined with his own in ways he was only beginning to understand. The diner felt different that afternoon. The familiar hum of conversation and the clatter of dishes seemed distant, muted by the gravity that hung over Daniels and Mariah. The man in the dark suit had gone, but the urgency of his message lingered like a shadow over their small corner table. Daniels' mind raced, a storm of questions and fears swirling as he studied Mariah. She sat calmly, as if nothing had changed, folding her hands over her mug of coffee with the ease of someone used to navigating chaos. And yet, the truth of her situation had settled like a weight in the pit of his stomach. Mariah began to speak, her voice quiet but steady, outlining what Daniels needed to know. She was not merely a witness in a minor case. She held information capable of toppling a network of corruption that spanned city officials, organized crime figures, and even people within law enforcement. Her evidence was not hidden in files or digital storage. It was in her knowledge, her observations, and the careful records she had kept over months, even years. Daniels listened in stunned silence, realizing the precariousness of her situation. Every step she had taken on the streets, every conversation, every quiet act of survival had been a calculated move to keep herself safe and gather proof. When she finally looked up, their eyes met, and there was a clarity in hers that cut through his confusion. "I didn't ask for help before," she said softly, "because I had to protect myself. But now, I can't do it alone. Not anymore." Daniels felt a surge of protectiveness he hadn't anticipated. It was one thing to enforce the law, it was another entirely to safeguard a life so fragile yet fiercely determined. He nodded, words failing him for the first time in years of service. Their plan was immediate and simple, yet fraught with risk. Daniels would ensure that she had secure transport from the diner to a safe house, a place unknown to anyone outside the investigation. Mariah would continue to maintain the facade of her street life, blending into the city's margins, while Daniels coordinated with trustworthy officials to protect her identity. The logistics were complex, but Mariah seemed to anticipate every challenge, detailing contingencies with a precision that impressed Daniels. She had survived this long by being meticulous, by reading people and situations with an accuracy that bordered on intuition. As they rose from the table, Daniels was acutely aware of the weight of the city around them. The streets, the park, the crowded sidewalks, all were no longer merely the backdrop to his routine. They had become potential threats, stages on which the delicate balance of safety and danger could shift in an instant. He kept a watchful eye on passers-by as they exited the diner, sensing a heightened tension in every movement, every glance. Mariah walked beside him with calm determination, her demeanor a stark contrast to his racing thoughts. The journey to the safe house was tense yet quiet. Daniels drove slowly, checking mirrors and side streets, noting details that might indicate surveillance. Mariah, sitting beside him, offered no unnecessary words, only occasional guidance or subtle insights about the patterns of the city that she had learned over years of careful observation. The silence between them was filled with mutual understanding, a partnership forged not just by necessity but by a growing trust that had developed through shared meals, stories, and now, shared danger. When they arrived at the safe house, a modest, nondescript apartment on the quieter side of the city, Daniels felt a sense of relief wash over him. Mariah entered with the ease of someone familiar with moving unseen, immediately beginning to organize her belongings as though she had been there countless times before. Daniels watched, impressed by her adaptability, realizing that her calm exterior was not a mask but a testament to her resilience. As night fell, they sat together, reviewing her documents and plans. Daniels could see the depth of her intelligence and foresight, the careful way she had constructed her defense against forces that would gladly see her harmed. He felt a mix of admiration and awe, recognizing that the woman who had once been a figure of quiet curiosity in a diner was now a central player in a dangerous and complex battle for justice. The stakes were higher than he had imagined, and the line between ordinary life and extraordinary danger had disappeared entirely. In that moment, Daniels understood the true significance of their connection. What had begun as a simple routine, a shared lunch, casual conversation, laughter over coffee, had evolved into something far more consequential. He had been granted a window into a world few saw, a chance to protect someone whose courage and intelligence demanded respect. And Mariah, for her part, had placed her trust in him, recognizing that their alliance was more than circumstance, it was a necessity, a bond forged in the unlikeliest of places. The night stretched on, quiet but charged with anticipation. Daniels and Mariah, sitting side by side, knew that the days ahead would be dangerous, uncertain, and full of challenges they could not yet foresee. But they also knew that together, they had a chance to navigate that danger, to face the forces arrayed against them, and to emerge not just as survivors, but as agents of change in a city that had long underestimated them both. And in the soft glow of the safe house, amid the quiet hum of the city outside, Daniels realized that this was only the beginning of a story that neither of them could have predicted, a story shaped by courage, trust, and the unpredictable twists of fate that had brought them together.